Well, there's been much speculation in the media and even from Durham District Attorney Mike Nifong about whether a date rape drug might have been involved in the alleged rape of a stripper at a Duke Lacrosse party this past spring. But test results released to the public today found that there was no controlled substance in the accuser's system. Joining us now, criminal defense attorney Ann Bremner and host of The Lineup on Fox News, Kimberly Guilfoyle. Good to see you both. And this test that was used is a test of hair, which is kind of controversial. Some people say you really can't even tell from that test whether this kind of a drug was used. So how reliable is this information?
Well, but in this case, you're supposed to test within 12 hours. And there was no tox report, remember, no testing in the emergency room. And then, you know, a month and a half later, they test the hair. So what you have here is that there was no GHB. There was a hint that there's that kind of evidence, and there's no evidence of it whatsoever.
Can we really trust this, Kimberly? I mean, you know, a number of labs refused to do this test.
You're absolutely right. And they tried to go to the FBI and a number of other highly reputable labs, even one in North Carolina, and they said, we can't do it. You've got to go to someone who specializes in hair testing. Now, hair can be used to test for certain common drugs that we're aware of, like cocaine, methamphetamine, that type of thing in the system, heroin. But what we're looking for here in this case was there a date rape drug?
Does this conclusively answer that question?
Or Rohypnol? I don't think it does. It can be challenged. But at least the district attorney is putting forward the evidence to say, look, we want to test this and get all the information out there. So some people are saying, hey, is this the final nail in the coffin?
If you're going to do it within 12 hours, and by the way, why wasn't a urine toxicology test, Ann, done at the time she was initially examined?
Because they didn't have evidence that she was under the influence of that drug, and she never said so. She was under the influence of something called Flexerol, which the symptoms of which, or side effects, are paranoia and confusion, and she was drinking as well, so that would compound those effects. But there was no indication, therefore they didn't do the test. Again, evidence clearly against the prosecution.
And it's Rich Lowry. Let me ask you, if she had been drugged with GHB, would she have remembered the event in question?
Absolutely not, Rich. That's a great question. She would have no recall whatsoever. And again, against the prosecution, she says she remembers. And she goes through great detail. You know, this case reminds me of a protracted version of the John Mark Carr case. No DNA, demonstrable alibi. Now, of course, no date rape drug. All we don't have in this case is the champagne and the giant tiger prawns, I think they were.
Kimberly, what do you think? Does this is any way reminiscent of the John Mark Carr case, and a DA perhaps overreacting or not really having much case there?
Yeah, but here's the difference is that we saw the Boulder DA say, fold the tent and say, look, we've tried to get this evidence. We're clearing this guy, exonerating because he's not the one. But in this case, the DA is still sticking with this case after months and months of criticism and evidence and police reports being exposed. Why? That's the question. Why hasn't the DA dismissed this case? Is there something else we don't know about? Because we already know she has huge credibility problems. So it looks like this case is going a slow death. He's putting it off. It shouldn't go to a jury if the evidence isn't there.
Now, Ann, there was this extensive New York Times article last week on this case. I'm sure you're familiar with it. One thing that jumped out at me in that piece that didn't seem to make a lot of sense, but maybe I'm wrong, was apparently her physical injuries a day later seemed to be greater. That initially an examination of her head, neck, shoulders didn't show any bruising or anything of that nature, but then a day later she's showing up limping and saying she'd been knocked on the head on the sink and all sorts of other things.
Well, there could be a lot of different explanations, and that's by Duff Wilson from Seattle, who's been a finalist for three Pulitzers, and New York's gain is our loss in terms of his expertise and writing skills and investigative skills. But there could be a lot of explanations for that. Things that happened in the interim, things that happened before that worsened. Bruising changes, of course, over time, but may not be consistent necessarily with rape. And he said in his article there were many holes in this case.
And we thank you very much. Thanks for being with us. Kimberly, good to see you. Thanks.